As human beings with countless different and colorful stories, it's really damned weird that those stories almost seem to stop mattering once you've had children. And to a lot of people, what can be seen immediately is what we become. Yep, there's a mom and she's snapping at her kids in the middle of a grocery store. She must be an ungrateful shrew who doesn't appreciate the magic of motherhood, so I'm going to get out my phone and call CPS right now because those kids are going to turn out screwy. Their mom clearly sucks. And it's widespread too, even amongst parents. We feel often that we have to have the same stories in order to be able to support one another. We assume that anything outside of what's normal for us is wrong. So, as you'd imagine, this leads to feelings of isolation and feelings of losing our voices. My guest this week and I both agree that our voices only get stronger when we feel comfortable speaking out, and that community is the only way to achieve that. I'm Ariana Bradford, and this is the NYAM Project Podcast. Hey everyone, as I've mentioned, I'm Ariana Bradford, and this is the NYAM Project Podcast, and you're listening to episode 13. Mom, spread your message. So Kendra is a NYAM alum. I photographed her when NYAM was still largely a photographic project. She's written some awesome pieces for our website. She's a very insightful and awesome addition to this whole thing, and so when I knew we were doing a podcast, I also knew that she and I would need to talk. For those of you who haven't read the feature we did on Kendra, here's a little bit on who she is, and a bit more emphasis on why she, and we, do what we do.
My name is Kendra Atkins Boyce, and I grew up as a Navy brat, so I always had trouble with that question of where you're from. But when I was 15, we moved to Blacksburg, Virginia, where my mom's family was living, and that became my home. I basically refused to leave for 18 years because I was like, I finally have a home. I'm going to stay here. And then when I had been there for 18 years, my husband got his PhD and said, hey, there's this job in Portland, Oregon. Should I apply for it? And I said, sure, apply for it. Next thing we knew, we were here in Portland. So we've been here for 5 years. I have 2 daughters. One is almost 10. She'll be 10 in October. And the other one is 2.5. So she's the aforementioned little one who is often keeping me on my toes. So it's kind of nice to just let her do her thing somewhere else without worrying about her running into the street. So and so I was a middle school teacher for 10 years. I taught middle school English, and I started kind of seeing myself as a writer a little bit into that process. And so when we moved to Portland, I said, well, I'm going to step away from teaching for a while and just kind of see where this takes me. So I started focusing on writing. I started a memoir, and I started a couple fiction books, and I then started hooking up with Portland Mom's blog and a couple of other outlets, and that's where I found you, Not Your Average Mom Project. And I love writing about my truth and my experience, and I think that the reason that I love that so much is that sometimes other people see themselves in my story, and it gives them something. So I get something from telling the story, and it gets them something. They receive something from hearing themselves in my story.
Right. No, that's so incredibly important, I think. And that's part of the reason why this was started in the first place is, the need for community and connection, because there's a lot more for us to connect over than I think we think there is.
Yes.
And
we tend to focus on the differences instead of where we really are. We're all human, and we're all having experiences and all having struggles. And I think that instead of using that as a reason to separate ourselves, I think we can find ways to connect with each other.
100%.
So that's why I
Yeah,
love
thank
what you're
you.
doing.
No, I think that that's totally important. We have more common occurrences than we think we do. And the most
Yeah,
important thing,
definitely.
I'm not saying that we have to agree on everything. I'm far from the kind of person who would agree with everything on anything, on, everything, but at the same time, I feel like one of the things that you and I have always seen eye to eye on is the fact that whether you agree with other people or not, you can still be kind and you can still see yourself in those people. Um, you know,
Definitely.
and
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I've always really appreciated about you is I've always noticed that you're really good at looking at other people and being able to put yourselves in yourself in their shoes, which is why you're are you still dueling, or is that a word?
Yeah, it is. I think it's a word we've invented, but so I'm not actively doing births at the moment, but I am now um moving into my work as a birth trauma doula. So instead of supporting people always in the birthing room, or like in the pregnancy, my the work that I've realized I'm here to do is to help people after they've experienced trauma, specifically birth trauma, to connect to resources and to find ways to share their story for whatever purpose they have. For some people it's sharing their story so that they can heal, and for other people it's sharing their story so someone else can realize that they're not alone. And for other people it's just a matter of like hearing their story reflected in somebody else's experience and realizing like, oh, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm human. I think we tend to get into that idea of like, there's something wrong with me, why can't I just like take to motherhood the way that everybody else seems to. And I think that when we're really honest, like, motherhood is difficult for everyone in some respects, and sometimes it doesn't even come until like the kids are grown
Exactly.
up, or but it's a tough job, and it's an important job, and it deserves respect, and it deserves love, and it deserves connection instead of disconnection.
Experience is everything. It's what makes us who we are. It's different from one person to the next, and even less acknowledged. It varies from one age to the next in the same person. The truth is, people are usually so wrapped up in their own shit that they're not going to think to check into your experience. They're not going to ask you what makes you a whole ass person. They're not going to think to get to know you. So, along with trying to be mindful of what makes others who they are, we need to be open about our own stories, both for our own good and for the good of our children.
And I see it too with having two kids, like that the things that they each like their experiences and my experience of being their mother is completely different.
Exactly.
Like my first daughter maybe ran away and hid from me once, and her little sister, like, that's her favorite thing to do, and she likes to get quiet and then make everybody panic, and then she finally just says, I'm just kidding. And when you're like, your blood pressure is through the roof and your heart is racing, like, oh yeah, okay, you're just kidding, yeah, okay.
That was hilarious, dear, but not really. Don't ever do that again. Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
Thankfully, like, so far we've managed to block her from actually leaving the house. So like, I know she's in the house somewhere, but
Still.
yeah, I never had to put those guard things on the doors for my older daughter. But with the little one, it's like, that's the only way I can keep her from like running up the driveway when I don't even know she's out of the house. So
Don't you miss
it's
the
a whole
days?
different world.
Don't
Two
you miss the
different
days
kids.
when you could put them down somewhere and they just stayed?
I know.
Like you would just set them down behind you and you would turn back around and they were still there.
It's still there, yes.
And it just
Although
doesn't last
Siren
long
started
enough.
pretty early on with like figuring out how to roll.
Oh
So she
no.
wasn't exactly the way I put her down. So before she could crawl or walk, she rolled
You didn't
out of
get much of a
sight.
break at all.
No. Hence why she's at preschool right now.
Oh my god. So, did
Yes.
you go through that a lot, would you say? Did you go through the whole, like, wondering if you were alone in the struggles you were in when you first
Yes. I
started
mean,
parenting, or?
I did, and I think I've been reflecting a lot over the last weekend, especially because I just went to a conference for Postpartum Support International, which is an organization that's all about bringing together postpartum support professionals. And and I so when Kyrus was first born, I realized later like what I was experiencing was birth trauma, which is why that's my passion now is like helping other people figure out how to name it and how to process through it. Because I was told over and over again to just get over it, that all that mattered was a healthy baby. And I was lucky because somebody else in the same situation had lost their child, or um, lots of very unhelpful things. I was struggling with chronic pain and fatigue, and I was told that I was fat and I had a young kid, and that was why I was tired all the time, and that when she got older and I started exercising, that everything would be better. Um, so that went into that was 5 years of chronic pain and fatigue, but not knowing what it was exactly. And I finally when we moved to Portland, I went into a doctor and said, "Can you help me rule out fibromyalgia? Because I know that was something my grandmother had. I don't really understand exactly what it is, but like maybe that's something of what I'm dealing with." And she was like, "Oh yeah, this is fibromyalgia. Like all of these boxes get ticked off." But I was dismissed over and over again, um, even by people whose job it was to help me. You know, they just wanted to tell me to just get over it. And I think most things are you, you don't get over them, you get through them. Most important things. Um, and you need help getting through them. It's not like you can just snap your fingers and be over it. Um, so yeah, that was my early experience, and I realized like that cascaded into um, bunch of other situations in postpartum depression and anxiety, and questioning myself at every turn about the decisions that I was making around motherhood. And it was a really dark period for me. Um, from the outset, I think that kind of cast a cast a fog over early motherhood for me that I wish I had had more help getting through.
No, you're 100% right, though. It's definitely one of those things where, and I'm sure you found the same thing, because I did as well. I actually suffered shortly after my daughter was born from some sort of weird hypothyroidism, and I remember going into the doctor, and it's like right after you have a kid, so many things get
Hmm.
dismissed as not important. And it sounds like your fibromyalgia situation was the exact same way, where it's kind of like you show up and you're like, I don't feel right. And their response is immediately, well, you just had a
Yep.
kid. So that's all, there's nothing else to talk about.
Yes.
And, it's almost kind of treated as if parenthood or coming into motherhood is the explanation for everything. I still remember saying, hey, I'm more tired than I've ever been. I am super tired, and being told, well, you have two kids, so
Of
of
course.
course you're
Yeah.
tired.
Exactly.
And I'm like, well, yeah, but, yeah, I'm tired, but I'm more tired than I'm supposed to be. Like, I'm trying to tell you right now, I can tell something's off. So we have a lot of health issues that tend to be
Yeah.
dismissed because of giving birth and having kids. And I almost feel like that's an even stronger support for what you were saying earlier about we need to
Right.
talk. We need to talk amongst each other, and we need to connect amongst each other, because that's the only way that we're going to figure out, oh no, this is not normal.
Yeah.
This is not a thing that we should be dealing with.
Exactly. Like honestly and authentically, and not being ashamed of our own story, because then that's going to keep us from sharing it. I think shame is a big part of it, because we have these models of what it means to be a mother in society, and it's sort of like the Madonna, like I am the martyr to my children. And I read an article recently about how like no, I'm not pursuing this degree for you. It's about that it's okay for moms to have passions outside of their family. And like, it's not just okay, like it's good. And we should support that because it's part of them being whole people. And we want mothers to be whole people. We want fathers to be whole people. And that's good for the family at large if everybody is getting to be their full selves.
Exactly. You want your children to be parented by full people, not by
Yeah.
what you feel like you should be, because that caricature is exactly that. It's a caricature. It's not a
Yeah.
full person. And I read that article too,
Yeah.
actually. And I think it's really cool that there does seem to be, is still small, but a small group of people who are now starting to say it's okay to say that you're doing things for yourself and not just for your kids. It's
Yeah.
okay to say that you're doing something because it makes you feel whole, and running a family isn't the only thing that can
Right.
fulfill you,
Definitely.
because we're definitely told, from the start that a good parent is somebody who feels whole when they parent, and that's it, that they can't feel whole outside of their kids, and that's not healthy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think specifically raising daughters, I am very aware that they at some point may decide to become mothers, and I don't want them to see me as someone who used them as an excuse to not live my full life. Um, they're not an excuse, they're an inspiration.
When we speak out, like I said, we help ourselves and our children, but we also help the people around us. Kendra learned this in a big way, and she's hoping it's a lesson that she can impart on as many others as possible.
When I became pregnant with my second daughter, it was kind of it was a triggering experience for me because it was like, oh, here we go. Here's this roller coaster again. And how am I going to be treated? And am I going to be re-traumatized? And like, how's the birth going to come out? And I think that you've probably heard me say this before, but I refused to let her have a job before she was even born. So I was not going to rely on her birth to be healing for me. I was going to do the work beforehand because I wanted her birth to be her birth, like the way she came into the world, however that was. And I realized, like, looking back on it, that's what Karis had also. Like, she came into the world the way that she needed to. What I needed that I didn't necessarily get right away was validation and respect for my experience of it also. Like that, yes, I am so lucky and all that matters is a healthy baby, and that she has a healthy mom and she has a healthy dad and she has a healthy family that is going to be able to support her in the, moving forward through her life. And so when my second daughter was born, I kind of went into it with like 3 different birth plans. Like, if this happens, then this, if this happens, then this, if I have to go to the hospital again, these are the things that are important to me. These are the people that I want to have around me. And I ended up having her at home in a snowstorm in 4 hours flat, but I didn't have that.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
A home birth after cesarean, like a completely different experience. But, it's part of it, 'cause I went into it saying, she's a different child. This is going to be a different birth. And I'm a different person than I was before. So a lot of it was around me, like learning to speak up for myself. And when I had medical professionals who were not treating me with respect, like demanding respect and saying, like, listen, I don't want this nurse anymore if she can't seem to figure out that I'm planning a home birth and stop asking me what hospital I'm going to. Or, these like doctors realizing that they need to take my blood pressure before and after the appointment because my blood pressure with my home birth midwives was consistently low and fine and normal. But when I was doing co-care with my doctors at the hospital, just in like the preparing for eventualities, it was consistently higher. And so they were trying to say that I had eclampsia or preeclampsia. And I said, no, this is a problem here. And this is a problem with the way that you're treating me. This is not a problem with me. or my body. So like, let's be clear on that.
Jeez, you went through a lot. That's a crazy story, having a home birth in 4 hours during a snowstorm.
Yeah. The midwives almost
That's
didn't
gonna
make
be
it.
that's gonna be a really cool story to tell her someday, because
Yes.
like that's something a lot of people have not done.
Right.
Um,
Well, and I think even just like the percentage of people who attempt a home birth and then especially after a surgical birth the first time around is like, I'm among a very small percentage of people, and it's like it's an important story because it's not necessarily about the outcome. It's not about the outcome. It's about the way that I learn to advocate for myself and learn to heal myself and learn to find the people who are going to help me heal. Um, and I think that part of it was more work than it should have been for me to find those things. And that's one of the reasons that I'm very driven to make other people's experience different.
right. And here's the thing. So I personally, and in no way am I saying that you did the wrong thing. I would actually personally never do a home birth just because I don't have it in me.
Yeah.
But the thing that I love about what you just said is that a lot of us don't feel comfortable advocating for ourselves. We don't.
Yeah.
Especially when we're doing something that other people may not agree with. And the thing that I love about what you just said is that I feel like even though I might not feel comfortable doing a home birth myself, I 100% think that you should have advocated for yourself, because you weren't hurting anyone. You
No.
weren't hurting yourself. You were making a choice for yourself that seemed to be the best one. And if during that choice you had found that you were hurting someone for some reason, however, you would have made the right choice for your kid. And that's
Yeah.
the mistake that I think a lot of people make, is that they don't realize we're all trying to make just the best, we're all just trying to make the best decisions for ourselves and for our kids.
Yeah.
That's literally our number one goal. And maybe we're not making the same decisions. Maybe we don't agree with those same decisions. Maybe we don't think that we would ever be able to do the same thing that someone else would do, but that doesn't make it wrong.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make it wrong for that person's specific situation. And so I love the fact that you were like, I had to learn to advocate for myself, because I think a lot of us are afraid to advocate for ourselves because we're afraid that people would look at us and say, well, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's part of it, is like that stepping out of that idea of being a good girl, and like where somebody else's feelings are more important than my own, somebody else's experience is more important than my own, and also just like trusting myself. Like you said, that I was going to make a different decision if a different decision needed to be made. And what I was doing was, I mean, the way that I looked at it was that I was setting the stage for what I wanted, and I was being flexible to the fact that it might not turn out the way that I wanted. And saying like the first go round really taught me like I need to focus on how I want to feel, what is most important to me. And for me, the second time around, it was that I was not alone. And so that's one reason that I did co-care with the hospital-based midwives and my home birth midwife, is that I wanted to know that they knew me. They knew that I was making good decisions. They knew that I had gotten good prenatal care if it happened that I had to transfer to the hospital. And I chose the home birth midwives, who said to me from the beginning, like, if you have to go to the hospital, this is our role when we go there. We're going to transfer to being like your doulas. And if you end up having a surgical birth, then we are respected by this hospital, and they will allow us to be additional providers unless it's like a knockout emergency situation. But even so, we know ways to help you like not feel alone when when everything is over. But birth is profound. It's profound however it happens. And it can be profound in a beautiful, life-changing way. And that can be an easy transition, or it can be really, really a lot harder than it needs to be. And it can cascade into these other things, like I said, with postpartum depression, and anxiety, and self-doubt, and all of these other things that come up. Breastfeeding difficulties, all of it, and I look back and if I'm not feeling very self-compassionate, then I can be like, why couldn't I give that experience to my first daughter? And then when I'm able to look at it with compassion, say I did the best that I could in the moment, with the support that was available to me. And I have made it my mission to give other people different kinds of support in whatever way I could in the moment, whether that's in my personal life or in the articles that I write, where I'm very honest about my experience, or in, working with people after they've experienced trauma to help them figure out how to process it. So part of that is just like learning to say, this is what happened. This is why it was traumatic. This is my experience. It's okay for it to be my experience. You don't have to understand it. What you have to practice with me is compassion and, come at me with humanity. And that's just so important. It helps us all feel like we're just not in it by ourselves. Because we're not in it by ourselves. There are people out there who can help if you know where to find them.
Oh, and by the way, Kendra is releasing her own podcast soon. It's something important and something you should be looking out for. So here's a little more information on it.
It is called Love Notes to Mom, and it came out of my realization that I think just moms don't get enough love, just for the immensity of the work that they're doing. And I think a lot of times the work that they're doing is dismissed as not work because it doesn't bring in a paycheck. If someone's in a stay-at-home mom, or work at home mom, or trying to build a business or whatever, if they're not out in the world and in society, then the love is just not always there. And so one of my friends said, wouldn't it be great if people could write love notes to mom? And I said, that's what the podcast is going to be, because my work with individuals and with group is around birth trauma, but there's also just, I think, elevating this role in society's eyes and saying mom, my tagline is moms are my favorite people, because I just think I know so many amazing people who are also mothers, but who are also writers or executives or, creatives, and nobody is just a mom. I think that it's just dismissed as you're just a mom, but that is so important, even if that is what you are focusing your energy on. So I ask people at the end of every interview, I say, tell me your love note to mom. What is the thing that you would tell yourself as a new mom, or your mom, or just moms in general? What do you feel like they need to hear? And one of my recent interviews was with Sarah Lax, who's just started an online postpartum support group, and she's also a midwife and a nutritionist. But she said, being held is your birthright. And I said, oh my God, that is something that I needed to hear. It's not just my baby who gets to be held. I deserve to be held. I deserve to be nurtured in this birth of myself as a mother. And I'm loving what's coming out of it. I'm so excited to share it with other people.
For those of you interested, Kendra has agreed to share the release info about the podcast, and as soon as I know more, I'll be including it in the show notes, and I'll let all of you know about it in our next newsletter. The NYAM Project podcast is written and produced by me, Ariana Bradford. You can find out more about us at wearenyam.com or on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under the NYAM Project. Thank you to Kendra for giving us some of her time this week, and we'll see you again next time.